Welcome back to Faith and Logic, episode 13. As you can see from the thumbnail, today's episode is about finding faith or faith through logic. I don't know what the title will be exactly, but we're talking about faith today. If you listened to the last episode, should I say, thank you for wishing me a happy birthday if you did, whether that was public or private. I appreciate it. For those who care, I had a good birthday. It was very chill. I went to the Cotswolds, enjoyed the English countryside, very simplistic, but very, very fulfilling at the same time. So today we're talking faith. Faith is today's topic. Um, and as we always do, we'll start with the words, right? So faith, what does faith mean? What is faith? And it can be described in these two ways. So faith, complete trust or confidence in someone or something, or if you're taking a more religious perspective on this, a strong belief in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual conviction rather than proof. Proof, should I say. Okay. So I think again, as I always say, we those are very two common understandings, I think, for most people. Faith is believing without seeing, perhaps, or trusting without proof or evidence, or having a strong feeling of confidence in something without really having anything to back it up, which is tangible. I think tangibility is what separates certain forms of trust from faith specifically, because you can have trust in something which is backed by a lot of evidence, whereas faith is very floaty. It removes the tangibility. It requires a lot of personal trust and belief and confidence, and again, we're lacking that tangibility there. There's an element to which we can't quite grab, can't quite touch. However, this almost creates a stronger feeling of belief, because we're not basing it on something which is evidentiary. We're basing it on something which is non-scientific, something which is ethereal, non-tangible, something beyond explanation in a lot of ways, a lot of speakings. It's felt. Okay. I think the one of the primary differences, it's felt. It's not very much seen, observed, heard, but is very much felt internally, consciously. And that, I would say, is the main difference between faith and evidence-based understandings and belief systems that we have, right? I think again, what I'm really trying to do today is to give you guys, anyone who's watching this, who or listening to this, should I say, who is on their path to faith, or maybe doesn't quite have faith, or doesn't understand faith, or wants to find their faith, or wants to hear the perspective of someone who has faith, and to understand better why and how they came to have this belief or understanding. I'm giving you my perspective. I think, as you know, the name of this is called Faith and Logic. Logic is a big part of how my faith is, or what it's comprised of, should I say. My faith is comprised largely of logical understandings through my own perception of reality, my existence on this planet, and how I interact with other humans, and how other humans interact with each other, and the environment in which we live. That is the large that is a large portion of how my faith is made up. Okay. So we'll start with the logical things that, again, aren't science based, but to me, through my own understandings, my ability to discern, seem very logical in how I've kind of founded my faith, the foundation for it. So the universe, to me, has a clear design. And if there is a design, that means there must be a designer. And this, I believe, is the entity which gave birth to us. Humans is what we call ourselves, right? But as we go through this conversation, you'll realize that a large semblance of my belief system is centered around the fact that I think humans don't really know very much. I think we're very misinformed, or uninformed, should I say, about our existence, where we come from, how we came to be, what we're doing here, the reason for us being here. A lot of these questions elude reasoning and understanding from the human perspective. Why that is, I'm not quite sure. There's large gaps in my understanding, right? And these are gaps that I have completely made peace with the fact that I will never have answers to. Okay. There's certain things within our existence that, for your own comfortability and, I guess, journey in life, I think it's very, very helpful if you can make peace with certain things never being explained to you. Perhaps there are explanations in death, and that process after life, whatever that is, because again, I don't have any understanding of that, nor does anyone else who's walking the face of this planet. But I've accepted those things. I've fully accepted that we don't know what happens after we die. We don't know why we're here. We're never really going to have a strong understanding of why we're here, and that needs to be kind of made peace with, I think, in order to kind of move through life comfortably, and also, as I said, to find your faith. So some of the other things which I think are quite important for my understanding are just the basic scientific aspects of what we understand about our planet, our solar system. So our placement in the solar system, the liquid water that is on the planet, our magnetic field around the planet, the perfect range of access in which we move, which create the inhabitable conditions of our planet. These things are all very perfect, right? They're all very perfect to sustain the life which exists on this planet. And again, for that to be a fortuitous coincidence, to me, seems too anomalous. Too anomalous for that to be the sole reason for everything, the rich world that we live in, of all the different things that we can experience, enjoy, and view, and kind of spectate on, for that to all be coincidental based on just time, having a long span and enough time passing for enough different variables to create the life which exists on this planet. It's far too coincidental for me. I won't accept that. And again, as we go through it, you'll understand how that belief is kind of arranged in my own brain. So then we get on to, I guess, the less logical aspect of spirituality, and where my spirituality comes from. I think it was in maybe episode 2 or 3. I can't remember which one. The one about sacrifice or anxiety. If you haven't viewed that, go back, have a look. I told you guys I grew up in a Caribbean household, or a Afro-Caribbean household, however you want to describe it. My parents took me to church when I was a kid, up until the age of about 15, when I think they found that, is it really right for us to continue to force Elliot to go to church if he doesn't really get much out of it, has a desire to go, and isn't connecting with the religion that the church is kind of all about. So at 15, it was my choice. I stopped going. And I had no real connection to faith at that point in any way, shape, or form. I was very much someone who lived for the world. I enjoyed life. And I think what church maybe gave me is an understanding of the belief in a higher power. And overall, I learned the core understanding that it is important to do as much good as you can for people. Because obviously, when you go to church, most people attest to this. Even if you're not of religious or spiritual nature, one thing you'll notice is the way that people speak to each other, greet each other, treat each other, what they're willing to do for each other. People are very, very altruistic at church, and I saw that as a fundamental way to be. Treat your fellow man, with respect, with care, with kindness. Show how good you can be as an individual. An element of it is like karma, right? You want to do good so that good will come back to you. Not specifically for that reason. It feels good to do good, but also, if you're out there doing bad, you have to expect that a certain amount of bad is going to follow you back as well. So that was largely what I got from church growing up, is just trying to do good and be a good person. I think, even as a fundamental basis, even if we're not very, religious, or we don't believe in the books, that is a great learning that you can get from being in the church environment, because it's a sense of community which you won't get in other places. And I'm sure it's the same at mosque. I'm sure it's the same at synagogue. The sense of community that these places create is fundamental to a thriving society, which is why a lot of countries have a religion which their culture is centered around. If you're from Britain, large portions of the population are Christian. However, also we have a huge Muslim demographic, and a huge Jewish demographic, and other religions as well. We're kind of in a more multicultural society now anyway. So in most countries, even if there is a base cultural religion which most people adhere to, you're going to find that within the community, within the populace, there are other subsets of different religions, and so on and so forth. Anyway, besides the point, right? So church gave me the understanding of faith from I guess a spectator standpoint, and then it also gave me the understanding of the need to do good to help your fellow man, which I think is of fundamental importance. And I think within us as human beings, we all have a core of good within us, which again I would say is something which was given to us by the Creator. You know, the very few people grow up wanting to harm or do bad or do. We're all looking for freedom, and we will sometimes do bad in the aid of getting that freedom. But fundamentally, I don't think anyone has a great desire to do that. Maybe there are some anomalies. There certainly are. I think as we look at history, right, there's been individuals who are fundamentally bad and have existed in that way, and we've seen some of the atrocities that these people have been able to do. However, I would call those people anomalies. I think as a species, tolerance is our highest state, right? So, as I've said, the logic is the planet, the design, the universe, how it all fits together, our place within our solar system, and how we are able to how this planet is able to inhabit life. And then the spirituality given to me by my parents through, taking me to church, giving me an understanding of that aspect of humanity and where that connection is. um and then we can get into some of the other things like nature. So the balance required to maintain the existence we live in feels very much non-coincidental, as I kind of described there with kind of the planet stuff, right? And for me, that's very much observed best in the wild. So the ecosystem separate from humans, right? What you see taking place in the wild, animals eating other animals, the food which is available for a lot of different species. All these things, I would say, for me, feel very much designed. They don't feel particularly coincidental. If I'm using my logical brain to just say that everything is just happenstance and we're just the beneficiaries of the perfect moment in time, I think it's a little narrow-minded to think that way. And that's not me casting any aspersions over someone who doesn't have faith. I just think that if you're thinking deeply about where we are in the history of time on this particular planet, it would be a little foolhardy to think that this is just coincidence, okay? Because it exists without us. If there's a virus which only takes out humans and it wipes all of us out, there'll still be plenty of life existing on this planet for many, many, many thousands of years to come. Okay, there's an ecosystem separate from us which is thriving all over the world, especially when you look at the oceans and the seas and all that life, and in particular in the fact that we haven't really uncovered a lot of the life which lives in the ocean as well. Huge ecosystem underwater which we know a bit about, but is largely untapped. So a belief in a higher power, perhaps, but overall, I learned an understanding that it is important for us to do good, and the balance in nature provides an understanding of how it's all stitched together. The design behind everything, the design behind our entire world that we live in. Our ecosystem and food chain works in a manner which is far beyond our comprehension. The 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 way it's glued together, the fabric of our existence on this planet, as I said, I'll state this again, is non-coincidental for me. It's very much of a design, and for there to be a design, there has to be a designer. And I think that the tricky part about that is, and I'll take a quick tangent here. The tricky part about the idea of there being a designer is our inability to comprehend what that could be, who that could be, what does that look like, what does that entity exist as. Is it a gas ball? Is it a human person who just is of a different substance to us? There's really no way for us to fully understand that. And I think that gap in our knowledge is what creates disbelief sometimes, because we cannot perceive what might have created us. It's easier for our brain to dispel the fact that we might even have been created in the first place. And in fact, it's easier to believe that it's just coincidence that we're here on this planet and that we have this kind of rich experience of life that just is very full, but also coincidental. It's a crazy way for us to look at things. And I would actually look at that through this lens here. And then what I'll talk about now is kind of the creation aspect of us, and also what as humans we're able to do from a fundamental standpoint. So from my perspective, we are very similar to our creator in so many ways, except the one we think matters the most, right? And that bit that we think matters most is our understanding of all time and space. So because we cannot perceive what was happening before humans existed on this planet, I think it's very hard for us to feel like anything put us here, or deliberately, should I say, because it's beyond comprehension. And I think that is again where faith comes into it from a very strong standpoint. Without that faith, you're always going to be blind to something which is greater than yourself. You really have to be able to disconnect from everything you see today as far as the planet goes and try and think of a time beyond where we are today. And that's very hard to do. But I would look at it through this lens, right? So we are an incredibly creative species in so many ways. How we manifest new life is interesting in its format and action. So obviously we have sexual reproduction, which is an incredibly complex system, being both spiritual and sensual in nature, which again feels very much like it was designed. Um, and we spoke about this, previously in the episodes we talk about lust, right? Sex is an amazing feeling from a sensory standpoint, and then when you look at it from a fundamental standpoint, the process of procreation, it, again, beyond understanding. We know how it works scientifically from a human standpoint, but as far as that being conceived as a process, for that to just be a part of evolution and us growing as like from a single celled organism into this much more complex being, again, just too narrow of an explanation for me to fully get behind. There is far too much complexity to that process for me to simply say, okay, yeah, no, we were a single celled amoeba, and we just developed, and now we have this complex process of procreation, which brings about new life every 9 months. And again, it requires that faith aspect, that higher belief. But for me, it's very fundamental, and from a logical standpoint, that you cannot simply position that as coincidence. Similarly, when it comes to creations, humans create great works of visual art, music, film, sculptures, to name a few disciplines, right? But human creation has the ability to create great range of emotions from deep sadness all the way to joy and elation. And that is how we affect each other. We're able to connect on a level of consciousness through our abilities and our understandings that we can emote. We can create feeling within others with our words, with our displays, with many other things that we have as a human species that I think, again, are very much beyond comprehension. And those emotions and the feelings that we get from some of the creations that we're able to manifest as humans, that is akin to what the creator did. He, she, it has far more comprehensive powers than we do as far as what they're able to manifest. But our ability to create comes directly from that higher source, that higher power, the ability to ideate, to conjure. These are things that are not simply just coincidence. They have a strong connection to the creator's energy. But again, you have to have a bit of belief to understand these things, and no one can really give you the faith. I think that's one of the most contrasting things about faith, is it requires you to see it for yourself. But of course you can't see it, so it's very complex in that way. So our abilities in this area cannot be taken for granted, as I believe the root spark of our creativity is one of our most symbolic connections to our creator, which is kind of just summarizing what I just said there, right? That ability to create, to ideate, to manifest is our connection to the creator in a very conscious way, very direct way. I believe the human consciousness to be incredibly powerful and to have a deep connection to the environment in which it exists. This one is a little complex, and this is one that I've developed through my journey in faith and through understanding. But to put it in its most um neat format, I would say that fundamentally, I don't make many decisions these days. A lot of the decisions are made for me, and that's done by two things. One, I have a strong understanding of what I think the creator would want me to do in any given scenario. Two, I have a fundamental nature as a human being that it is very, very, very difficult for me to go against. Even when my better brain says don't do that, my nature always takes over. And sometimes that does causes me to do the thing that I think the creator doesn't want me to do, because I'm not a perfect human being, right? There are no perfect human beings. I'm not a perfect entity. So sometimes I'll make mistakes, deliberate mistakes, you could say, because I cannot get around my own nature. However, that is always in battlement with my understanding of what I think the creator wants me to do. So that is the dichotomy. That is the juxtaposition I have working internally. However, there are moments where the signs that I'm seeing are so clear that it is very hard for me to not do the thing which I think the creator wants me to do. I could tell you about the signs, but they won't make any sense to you. I think they're very specific. We all get our own messages in our own ways. Having a connection to that faith, that consciousness, is paramount for seeing your signs. And once you can find them, life becomes a lot easier, because again, you don't really have to make decisions. Your nature and your understanding of the creator and the signs in life that are presented to you make it very easy for you to make your decisions and going through life. So I would summarize that connection in this way. So greater connection to the environment can have a profound effect on our ability to perceive the creator and the ways that this entity chooses to communicate with us. For example, I do not believe that time as we perceive it is entirely linear. And I would, I guess, summarize that with the understanding that oftentimes, especially since, I come into strong faith, I'm noticing how things that I've done 10, 5, 15 years ago have a deeply profound effect on things that might happen tomorrow or the day after or a year from now or a week from now, in a way which is, again, I cannot explain. And it sounds very ethereal and quite airy, but all I can say is that is my experience, right? And I hope if you've listened to a couple of these episodes, you don't think I'm a lunatic, crazy person. But that's the best way that I could describe it. Some of the things that I've done previously will have a deep impact on things that are going to happen later down the line, and not in a direct sense where we're talking about something which is an obvious connection. It's more stuff that you couldn't have manifested by yourself. These are things which are given to you by the creator, they're communicated to you by the creator. Your connection to the higher consciousness, the God consciousness, which I think we all are connected to in some way or other, has allowed these things to happen. Again, this is a journey that you'll have to go on yourself, but I'm just giving you my perspective on how these things manifest. Going back to the logic angle of our existence and my understanding of our existence, and this is a weird kind of abstract thing, which, again, if someone's listening to this and they have a good understanding of science and they can add a bit more context to this for me, I would greatly appreciate it. But I'm just giving you my perspective on this. One of the things which has always kind of, I guess, given me an eye for, the design of our existence is the senses. And I would summarize it through this. So sight, sound, and touch are primary ways we perceive our world. However, I've always found taste to be a very confusing sensory experience. It has incredible depth, but what fundamental use does it have beyond the sensation it provides? It is an incredibly hard sense to describe, but also greatly profound in the way that we experience it. And I would, there's other aspects to this, but taste is a great one because, as I said there, it's very hard to describe taste in a word format, but it is a very rich, very deep sense. Nothing like sight, sound, or touch, but taste is unique. And fundamentally, I don't know what the purpose of it is, but rich experience. And again, that speaks to design from my angle. A lot of, our greatest experiences are perceived through taste. The foods we eat, the things we enjoy tasting, the memories we have that are connected to taste. Very profound, very, very profound in that way. And I find it very difficult to get around that. As I said, it has incredible depth, but its fundamental use kind of escapes me in a way. And I really, it's one I really struggle with. And as I said, if there's a scientist or anyone watching this, I would love to know a bit more about taste, because for me, that can only be designed by someone else as a way that we can experience enjoyment or an understanding of our world through flavor. I really don't know, but taste is one of those ones for me, definitely. Um, and I think one of the aspects which, just to move the conversation on a bit, one of the aspects which I think is difficult when it comes to faith in the modern world is religion to a degree. And that's not to say that religion is a bad thing. It's not to say that I won't end up being religious, but I'm going to explain it in these terms. For the oversighting of the nature of our religious texts and how they're constructed in ways which format our existence, make it harder to grasp our creator, especially in the modern age where technology is so advanced. So obviously in the Bible, you have the 7 days of creation. If you were telling that story to an adolescent today, given what they understand of the world, it's going to be very hard for them to to give credence to that story. They're going to look at that and say, well, that's just not true. Okay, I have a much greater understanding of how life is made. I don't see a higher being who exists maybe in the sky or in space creating life on the planet in 7 days. It doesn't really make sense. So these books cover events from many millenniums ago, and this can make it difficult to contextualize the stories against our modern society. As I said, as with the time that has passed, I believe much of our actual history as a species is shrouded in mystery. We have many philosophers, scientists, and historians who have tried to fill in the blanks, but I believe there are things we just won't ever be able to uncover about our past. So this is what I described early in this conversation, right? I think there's a lot of missing information from our existence, which I know it's a bridge I cannot cross. Okay, we cannot get that information back, bar some crazy, or crazy is not even a word, but some m- m- miracle experience happening for all of society, like a Jesus type figure coming back and recontextualizing our existence through ways that we can understand in modern society. We cannot hope to gain certain understandings of our history. There is the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, so many different empires throughout history. There's BC, there's AD, there's a lot of information there. However, for the span of human history, I think there's a lot missing. Will we ever get that stuff back? No, I don't think we will. I think there's a lot of things that we'll just never truly understand from our history. And again, we have to make peace with that if we want to find that connection to the higher power and higher consciousness and, connect better. Similarly, I also feel we actually know very little about anything. Much like the ant has little understanding of the world in which it inhabits, I think humans perceive themselves to be far smarter and more knowledgeable about our universe than we could ever truly hope to be. And this is something which I think we would resist as a species, right? We want to believe that we are gaining understanding, we're growing, we're developing, we're moving at a great speed, we're endeavoring now to change planets, to move to other planets. But I think if we're being realistic, we don't really have a grasp of anything. When you think about the expanse of the universe, how much is unbeknownst to us? Like, yeah, we've created words and names for stuff. We have nouns and we have verbs and we have all these other things which help to describe our existence. But in reality, I just don't think we know very much. We just have our own, as a species which is highly intelligent for this planet. We have our own understanding of our experience of life, and it's complex, it's diverse, and it is very rich and has great depth, and it's certainly not a surface level thing, because as I said, we're connected to that higher consciousness. However, I would accept from my own standpoint, or I do accept from my own standpoint, that we're not very smart as a species. I think we just have done a good job of building enough understanding of what we can perceive on an everyday basis. And I find this fact comforting, as it allows me to let go of the need for control over my environment and accept that large parts of the human experience and existence are entirely beyond our comprehension. So again, that understanding that we're not all that intelligent allows me to give over the power to the higher consciousness, the creator, to understand that they have through creating everything, have a much greater understanding of the universe than I could ever hope to have. And if I lean on that consciousness, my connection to that power, I can gain insight that perhaps I could never hope to gain through other means. And that understanding is profound, and that's where you connect things like dreams and just manifestation. But again, without those things, and we try and understand, if we try and understand our experience of life solely through action, we limit ourselves greatly, because that is the surface level of our existence. Like I said, the nouns, the verbs, the things that we've done for ourselves. So then we come on to, I guess, some of the more obvious questions that people will sometimes present around faith and higher consciousness and belief in a higher power. And this I guess kind of goes around war, anger, suffering, violence, all the negative things about our existence that we do understand and we recognize, but we don't really attribute to a world which could have been designed by a creator or a god or anything like that, because why would they let these things happen? So those who lack faith in a higher power often cite the destructive nature of the human spirit as a reason for there being no God. If there is a God, why does he allow so many terrible things to happen? And I would counteract it with this. This is my counteract for that point, should I say. So I think the concept that God is an omnipotent being who would create us simply to intercede into our everyday goings on doesn't make a huge amount of sense. And let's expand that statement. So the concept that the creator made us and then said, you know what, I'm not going to allow anything bad to happen on this planet at all. I won't allow it. I'm not going to give these lot planetary free will. I'm just going to interject into everything so that nobody dies, nothing bad happens, there's no murder, there's no war, there's no violence, there's no ill will, there's no anger. It's just a utopia. I think is folly, I would say. And we have to accept that our nature alone is what creates these negative things. And that is the nature which is the antithesis of God or the creator, as I would understand it. We are very much responsible for the negative goings on that we experience and we see day to day. And if we're going back further than that, if we're looking at more religious books and subtext and for our understanding of how we got to here, I would imagine that somewhere around earlier in time, or the start of time, I should say, for human beings anyway, we were in a more utopia-like existence. However, I think humans probably thought themselves bigger than the creator, better than the creator in some ways, or just as good as, and we turned away from it. And in turning away from it, we left ourselves with nothing to fend against our nature but our own rationality. And that is what has led humans to some of the negative aspects of the societies we have today, because we're all jostling for position, for power, for prominence. And that, I think, is, well, it's very destructive, and it leads us to fight amongst ourselves instead of building together. And that is why I would say we have a lot of the negative aspects that we see today in society, in humanity. So God is not this omnipotent being who's going to interject and intercede. He has created the world which we live in, that is gift enough. What we do with it, how we treat each other, is up to us. Our desire to grow and to connect should keep us from doing these things. However, as we've seen in history, it doesn't, right? And that leads me on to choices. Okay, what we choose to do, how we choose to be, the way that we choose to treat each other. And we can most neatly describe that as free will. Okay. So our measure of free will over our immediate environment is paramount to our journey as a species. However, we are primarily driven by principles of good, a nature in us which is provided by the Creator, and which is our base state, right? I believe humanity is inherently good. True free will, as I would describe it, is our ability to shape your ability to shape your universe into what your being wants it to be. So that is your ability to manifest, your desire to create a world which is in the liking that you want it to be. Okay, in the design that you want it to be. Your life on this planet, what does that look like to you? Your ability to create that is your free will. However, I would say this requires complete relinquishing of control and acceptance in the creator slash higher power. So once you know what it is you want your world, your universe, your existence to be, you then have to let go of your feeling of control over that. Okay. You understand it inherently within yourself what your desire is. The only way to then achieve that desire is to relinquish control over your ability to create that desire. And you give over that control to the creator. You accept that your consciousness derives directly from that source, and that through that power, you can manifest anything you want for yourself. Being able to do that can bring about great, wealth, riches, and other things, but just peace, freedom, and harmony for yourself in a way which you could never have imagined. And without that, without the understanding, I do not believe that you can access free will. I think free will is something that will truly escape you if you cannot connect to the higher source which can give you free will. Free will isn't your ability to choose what you're having for dinner. That's just a choice. Okay. And whilst it's nice to have that level of earthly free will, right? It's good. We can make decisions. We can go outside. We can do whatever we want. To manifest what your being truly wants for yourself, for your family, for others, for the planet, to truly manifest that, you are going to have to connect to the higher power. To connect to the higher power, you're going to have to relinquish the control you think you have. You are no longer the God of your existence. You relinquish and you understand that there is a real God, a true creator, and they have the power. But they have imbued you with power through the consciousness and spirituality that dwells within you. And that consciousness dwells within the planet which they have designed for you. These understandings make life much, much easier. That is one thing I would say for sure. And again, we quite quickly, I don't know how long I've been talking for, but this is the end of the conversation, right? And I'm going to describe it to you for myself in these terms. Before I relinquished that control, I found myself often very confused. I knew what I wanted. I knew roughly the steps it might take to get me there, but I was often confused. I never really felt like I knew what to do next. And now that I've relinquished that control, as I kind of described earlier, I always know what to do. I'm never without an answer. I always understand exactly where I am. I always have a complete peace in the knowing that the creator has me. He's got me. And it does, like I said, it doesn't have to be he. It can be it. But it has me. It's got me. It understands what I want. And it's because I'm willing the creator's vision. The creator is willing my vision. And it tells me what direction to go in to get to the next step. And again, as I said, there are things that I've done many years ago which connect directly to the direction I want to go in now, even before I knew what I wanted to do. So the journey is not linear. And in closing, I guess I want to, again, this is largely for people who don't have faith. And I hope I've done this as coherently as possible. I feel like I've been quite all over the place, but I hope it's of benefit. And if you're on the path, you're not at faith yet, you're on your way there. This is the question that I would like you to ask yourself if you're not sure or if you don't believe. If there is a creator, would they be proud of you? Would they be proud of your actions, your behaviors, the way you treat people, the way you treat yourself, the vessel they've given you, the body they've given you? Let's say that you don't know if there is one or not. Just say there is one. Okay. If there is a creator, would they be proud of the things that you do, the way that you treat yourself, the way that you treat other human beings? That's a question you should ask yourself daily. And if you find yourself feeling that the answer is no, well, I would like you to then ask yourself, what are you going to do to change that? And I guarantee if you start moving in that direction, faith will begin to find you. It will happen slowly at first, but the signs of life, the signs of design will become very apparent to you, and you will unlock a mode of living which is something that you wish you always had, but you'll be grateful that you found it, and you'll finally be at some level of peace. You won't be without stress. You're not going to be living some life of happiness and joy every day, but certainly your understanding of your existence and your ability to move through life will become much, much easier. That's episode 13, Finding Faith. I'll see you guys in episode 14. Have a good day.